You have no idea how excited I am about today's video because today I'm going to be talking about eyeshadow palettes that have great autumnal color stories. And the reason I'm excited is because I love fall. I cannot wait for the cold weather to come, the crisp mornings, the leggings and boots and sweaters. I'm just so stoked that summer is leaving and fall is coming. As usual, I did film today's eyeshadow look. It is linked below in the description box, also carded above here if you want to see it, and it is using the Wildwood palette from Alter Ego. Now, I did have a palette pull-in. I used the Lure palette from Blend Bunny Cosmetics for this beautiful mauve matte on my lower lash line, but besides that, everything is from the Wildwood palette. So this is a palette which is perfect for today's video. This is very summer leaning into fall kind of color story. It's a little more monochromatic than I usually go for, but I like the color story, and it is a lovely, very, very warm, golden, sunset, end of summer kinds of days sort of palette. Do you know what I mean? This is a good palette choice for autumn. You're gonna get these kinds of looks on the whole, but it can go a little bit more neutral if you want to. If you want to stay in these slightly lighter tones, slightly more neutral shimmers, or you can go a little bit more colorful with these slightly more teal leaning green tones. Obviously this one here is gonna change the look, but on the whole I think it is a good palette as we come into the colder months because it's such a warm color story for the eyes. It'll probably contrast very nicely with our cold weather depending on which hemisphere you're in. You know, I know, give me some grace. I think my entire viewing audience is US based except for maybe a few people in the UK, but anyway, this is a very warm, cozy kind of color story, and it's going to contrast nicely with a lot of our cooler toned clothes for the cold weather. Every time I see this palette, I call it small but mighty. Here is the Colored Rain Queen Bee palette. It's beautiful. It's got amazing packaging, and the color story is very, very harvesty, very rich, warm, piles of leaves, apple pie, pumpkin spice. It's all happening right here. The shimmers in this palette are incredible. They're very bright, metallic, pigmented, vibrant, reflective, see you from space kinds of shimmers. And the mattes honestly are fantastic. This I think is the very best matte black that I own in my whole collection. And these are they're just so rich. There's nothing subtle or quiet about this palette in terms of what it's offering you, but you can go in really lightly, tap the product off your brush and get something a little bit lighter, a little bit softer, and actually pretty neutral with the shimmers. This shimmer here is also a little bit more duochromatic. It's got some like green flecks to it. So if you want to go more neutral, maybe stick to this one, but the looks are beautiful. It's such a great palette. I know a couple of you guys have purchased this palette on my recommendation and have said that you really enjoy it. Yeah, it's a good one. Here's a palette that may not immediately jump to mind if you're thinking about fall leaning or autumnal sorts of color stories, but I pulled this one out because I wanted something that wasn't just pumpkin patches and hay rides, but also did genuinely make me feel like it would work well for fall. Here is the Natasha Denona Retro palette. It's my only palette from the brand, and it's very nice. The quality in this is fantastic. I pulled this one out for today's video because it's very warm. It's not a really cold color story. It's kind of warm and cozy. It makes me think of fuzzy socks. It makes me think of warm, fuzzy blankets. I actually own a blanket that's really soft and kind of like, it's like a knitted microfiber sort of texture, and it's very much these sorts of purpley colors. There are definitely some cool tones in here. It's not wholly warm toned. I mean, I guess it does have a pretty even balance of cools. Like that's warm, but that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. This is warm, warm. I think it's probably pretty evenly balanced, come to think of it. But this one, it just looks so refined and quiet on the eyes. It's not super bold and dynamic. It's a beautiful, soft color story, and it's the sort of color, the sort of undertones that can be flattering on lots of different skin tones and with lots of different outfits. And much like the Wildwood palette, which is a dupe for Natasha Denona, much like that palette, you get kind of everything within the same color family, but you do have some variety as far as lightness and depth, some more neutrally leaning ones or some more deeper, saturated, colorful leaning tones as well. This is very nice, and I actually look forward to playing with it in the fall, just in general, because it's gonna give me these cozy, wrapped up in a blanket sorts of looks. This next palette is rather new to my collection, and I have loved it since I got it. Here is the Classical Paradise palette from Ace Beauté. They are rebranding, and everything on their site has been on sale for quite a while. I got this at 60% off, so like $16 or $17, I think, maybe $13, I forget, but it's beautiful. It is Ace Beauté's new formulation. The mattes and the shimmers are all very, very nice quality. The color story is so perfect for autumn. We've got the warm, reddy tones, couple neutral tones, some yellows, some greens, some more pinky sorts of shimmers that work with these purple, red kinds of shades. It's beautiful. Again, you've got a nice range, you have some depth, and you could also go more neutral if you don't want to play into the colorful looks. But yeah, it's a really, really good palette. It's beautiful, the quality is great, and it's perfect if you do want to go on a hayride. An oldie but a goodie, let's go back to ColourPop in their heyday. I actually have almost decluttered this palette a couple of times. Then I did declutter it and I listed it for sale and nobody wanted it. So I brought it back into my collection for my week of Plain Jane because I wanted a palette that had great colors but less exciting shimmers. Here is At Forest Sight between ColourPop and Raw Beauty Christie. This honestly is probably one of the best palettes that ColourPop's ever put out. Definitely one of their best collabs, I think, and it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. The reason I decluttered it is because I wasn't really using it, and I found that the quality, while good, wasn't as good as a lot of my other palettes, as almost any of them. That was really it. But I love the color story. I love the packaging. I think I'm just going to keep it. The hype for this palette has died down. Nobody's interested in buying it now. And like, we're not chasing after it like rabid dogs anymore. So I think I'm just going to keep it and play with it and enjoy it. It is a beautiful palette, a beautiful color story for the fall months, for these, as the weather gets cold and we see the leaves change. Do you live in a part of the world where the leaves change? I grew up in a part of the US where we got beautiful colors in autumn, and this kind of takes me back to that. Just your trees start out green and then they start to turn yellow and red and orange, and this palette is just lovely. It's just a beautiful representation of that. It's very earthy. It's very I'm not gonna say neutral, it's very grounded. It's very earth toned, even in the colorful shades. And we have a little whisper of maybe the ocean over here. I can imagine breakers crashing against rocks and like the smell of the ocean and the crisp salty air in the fall. Yeah, it's a great palette for this time of year. This next palette is a longtime favorite in my collection. Honestly, it's one of the first palettes I bought like a couple years ago, and when I was starting to get into colorful eyeshadow, and I have kept and thoroughly enjoyed it ever since. This is the Wilderness palette from Beauty Bay, an old time standard. It's so good. And now a couple of these shadows obviously are less autumnal. This whole upper row is very cool toned sky sorts of shades, but the rest of the palette is Pumpkin Patch, Apple Spice, Harvest and Fall, and hay rides and raking leaves in your backyard. That's everything that's happening here. It's so beautiful. It makes me think of mushrooms at the base of trees, and it makes me think of leaves, and again, the way that the colors change. Oh, I miss that. I no longer live in a part of the country where we get really good fall colors, and that makes me kind of wistful, but this palette is so beautiful for fall. And if you want, you don't have to stick to these more autumnal tones. You can obviously bring in other things like I did today. I've got this really yellowy look, but then this lower lash line is a beautiful mauvey colored purple, right? So just like that, you can start with autumnal tones and then bring in something a bit different. So you can still have a pop, a little bit of excitement, and have a very grounded and seasonal look. It's very, very nice. Great quality, beautiful formula. Two of my favorite shades ever actually are in here. This one here is Fossil and this is Ray. They're just beautiful. Ugh. Maybe I should put Ray. Ooh, should I put Ray on my inner corner? Eee. Just a little bit. Just a little bit, because it's pretty. Let's visit a palette that is actually the lowest performing in my collection. It does not perform amazing compared to the other indie brands that I have, but the colors of this palette and its undertones, if you've been here a while, you know which one I'm talking about, are just lovely, and they work so well on my skin tone. Here is the Strawberry Feels palette from Jaclyn Cosmetics, which I don't even think they're around anymore. I think she closed down the brand. Okay, this is pretty monochromatic, much like Wildwood. It's lovely though, and like I said, the undertones in this palette are so flattering on me. I feel so pretty when I wear these colors, even though the formula is not great. It fades over time, it's not very pigmented, it's not very striking. The shimmers are fine, they're fine. But the undertones, man, I just can't seem to get away from them. I especially love these over here and these here. Like everything's sort of in the middle. You don't have anything that's really pink or really red or really orange. It's all kind of floating in that nebulous area, but never quite landing on a distinct color. And it's beautiful. This is, again, not the most amazing quality, but I think it's a great palette to bring in for fall. It'd be fun to pair with other things, and it's definitely fun to pair with more exciting shimmers. I did feature this in my week of Plain Jane as well. This palette is brand new to my collection. This is quite an old one, but somebody recently gave it to me. Here's Subculture from Anastasia Beverly Hills. And I thought that this was a beautiful fall color story, really. I mean, the greens and yellows, but not primary greens and yellows. They're very murky, they're very earthy, very grounded. Like I said before, they're kind of mixed with some brown. So you've got these rich and saturated colors that remind you of a forest. They're not rainbow colors. I have used this palette once, so I'm going to play with this one some more. I think it's pretty. Definitely a great match for going into the fall season. Now, when I see this palette, I automatically think of Christmas, of course, right? It's the Merry Christmas palette from Oden's Eye, but this actually has quite an autumnal color story. It's very, very warm on the whole. It has rich and saturated reds and oranges and burgundies. It's got a black, it's got this deep forest pine sort of green. Of course, this red shade here is definitely more of a true red. I mean, it's named poinsettia, and it is more of a cool toned red with a blue sort of base. But when we also look at the shimmers in this palette, several of them are more neutral leaning. You have one or two that are outliers, but on the whole, this is a beautiful palette for fall. You're gonna get amazing looks. I've done a whole week of looks with this palette. It's so beautiful, it's excellent quality. The packaging is so much fun, and yes, it's Christmassy, but I think that the color story itself is less Christmas and more autumn. Let's talk about something from Cosmic Brushes or Cosmic Beauty. This is a palette that when I was going through my collection for today's video, I pulled this one out and thought, oh yeah, actually. Yeah, again, not so much pumpkin patch, not so much apple pie, but just these lovely, comfortable colors. Here's the Muse palette. And these are lovely, comfortable colors. We have the expected mustards and forest greens and more brown tones. It also has these beautiful, soft, purpley colors, which look beautiful with those other colors. You just might not expect them. And kind of like if I had paired the retro palette with the Wildwood palette that I've got on today, I would have gotten something that was, I'm sorry, I have an itch. I would have gotten something that was just so interesting and unexpected, but still works. And that's what this palette is. It's beautifully curated color story. A couple of things that are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then, okay, I wasn't expecting that, and yet it works. It's beautiful, it's interesting, it's creative, it sparks creativity. This is a lovely grungy garden kind of palette, so it would be lovely for spring, of course, but I think it's a great fit for fall too, with these deeper saturated tones, and again, really interesting color combinations. Now I want to talk about a brand new palette in my collection, but this one is so gorgeous, and I've only used it a few times, but I know that it's going to be a favorite. Here is the Unearthly Cosmetics Lure palette. We'll just forget about Medusa on the front because she's ugly, but, okay. Where can you even start with this palette? The color story is so stinking beautiful. It's so striking. The shimmers are shifty and dynamic and sparkly. The mattes are pigmented. They're rich. They're so vibrant and bold. There's depth. There's some lightness. And considering that it's only a 9-pan, absolutely striking. This is my first palette from Unearthly Cosmetics, and I am very impressed. Not surprised because they're kind of a big brand right now, but I'm impressed. It's very good quality, and it's a beautiful autumnal color story. Of course, you've got the orangey black tones, but look at all these shimmers. Look at the differences and the choices, your selection of beautiful complementary tones, light and dark. Nothing's too dark. You have more interesting tones like this pink and the teal, but then you have more expected or safe colors, and yet because they're shifting, they're gonna move in different directions. Like this is, what is this? Is this pink? Is it white? Is it yellow? Is it orange? It's all of them. It's all of them. And so your looks, you pair this shimmer with any of the mattes and you're gonna have a different result. So pair it with several of the mattes and one of the other shimmers, you're done. It's just too gorgeous for words. A tried and true and very autumnal favorite in my collection is the Flare palette, also from Ace Beauté. And I liked this palette. This is one of the first ones I bought early in my journey, and I liked it so much that I went back and I got the reformulation, which is the only time I've ever done that. I may do it with the Norns palette from Oden's Eye, but I haven't decided. Anyway, beautiful color story, beautiful autumnal harvest color story. It has these lovely, rich, warm, cozy, comfortable, sitting by the fireside kind of vibes. Oranges and reds, beautiful purpley aubergine colors up here, some bright blues. It's actually, come to think of it, it's very similar to the Wilderness palette, a little more curated, and it has some other colors like this one and these, but they're comparable and they're both beautiful. Like, You can get more neutral looks out of this. You can get quite colorful looks out of this if you want to, but on the whole, your selection for harvest kinds of tones is beautiful, and it's lovely quality. I always love my looks out of this palette. Wow, I have kind of a lot of palettes. I think that was 12. I do have an honorable mention. Here is the Haunted palette from Gourmand Girls. The reason this is an honorable mention is because this doesn't give me autumn vibes, except for a couple of the shades, like these over here, especially this green and these here. But the palette has a lot of purpley pinky tones, which, I mean, I guess some of the palettes I mentioned have purple pink tones, like Flare. I don't know. This one doesn't make me feel really harvest or autumnal. The Spooked palette would, but this is not Spooked. So it's an honorable mention because a couple of these tones are very autumnal and you do get beautiful looks out of it. You just have to be specific about your selection and colors if you want to lean more seasonally appropriate. But who cares about that? This is just for fun. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do let me know in the comments, which of these palettes do you have? Do you love them? What are your favorites? Are there other palettes that I could have mentioned, whether or not I own them? What are your favorite fall leaning color stories, your favorite autumnal palettes? Do you wear your eyeshadow based on the season, or do you just do whatever you want to do? I don't wear my eyeshadow based on the season, but I think it's a really fun theme, and I really like doing my eyeshadow based on themes or thinking about it underneath of an umbrella. How would I categorize this? Or what palettes would I put under this heading? It's so much fun. It helps me play with my collection, go through and touch everything and get re-inspired, re-excited. Like, oh, I haven't played with this in a while. Pull it out and put it on my stack to, you know, it's just a good time, and this is a great way for me to stay excited about all of the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful palettes I own and just be creative with them. I'd love to hear your suggestions, of course. What palettes would you have included in this video? Thank you so much for being here and for giving me part of your day. Do check the description box or the carded video to check out today's eyeshadow look if you want to watch that video. There are also other links down there, including any of these palettes that are available. Perhaps you'll consider liking and subscribing before you go, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.